to you or not. Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, right. So this is a brief introduction to Shakespeare sonnets. I know, I hope you know that five of Shakespeare sonnets are prescribed for your study in this semester in the first unit itself. So with this, we'll be closing the first unit. So to give you the brief introduction to the form of sonnet, which of course you might be very familiar by this time because you are reading all these as part of your first paper, that is Introduction to Literature, which is a very fundamental paper for non-literature students as well. Okay, so yet I have given you a brief information regarding the sonnet as a poetic form. See, you can take screenshots of these slides, or you can even note down. And if you are not able to note down, if your noting down is not complete, and if I am going to change the slide, you can let me know. Okay, right. A sonnet as a poetic form is said to have been invented by Giacomo da Lentini, that is in Latin only, in the 13th century. But however, it was popularized by a poet from Tuscany named Francesco Petrarch. That is why we call Petrarchan sonnet. Okay, he actually used the form to write poems, and he wrote a sequence of poems. I think 84 or more than 130 or so many numbers of sonnets, which are called as a sonnet sequence, uh, in which he expressed his unrequited love for a woman named Laura. Okay. During the Renaissance, English poets borrowed this form from Petrarch. So Renaissance as an era, an era of change in literature. Renaissance is rebirth. Other papers, in drama paper or prose and fiction, you might have gone through the introduction to Renaissance. What is Renaissance? This is the rebirth of literature, rebirth of faith, or rebirth of religion, culture, and practices, and so many. So I'm not going to give you further introduction for Renaissance. If you want, you can just consult any book of history of English literature, where you will know what is Renaissance. Renaissance, to give you the brief, is the rebirth. Okay, rebirth of many things, rebirth of all the things. And during the Renaissance period, actually, it is like a reawakening to literature and also other aspects in the society. So there is, during this period, English poets have borrowed this form of sonnet from Petrarch. You might be listening to this name Petrarch time and again in almost all papers where you deal with the form sonnet as a poetic genre, and also how it came to England, etc. So just to give you an idea who is Petrarch, I am giving you this slide where you have a brief introduction to Francisco Petrarch, who actually is not only a poet but is a humanist, diplomat, and of course poet. And he wrote the sonnet sequence, as I told you, to celebrate the unrequited love or virtue of his beloved, who is named as Laura. And he followed the tradition of Dante Alighieri. So Dante Alighieri is another Italian poet who is a very great and popular author of the Divine Comedy, which in Latin is like La Divina Commedia. And of course, Petrarch, in developing the sonnet form, has followed Dante, because Dante also wrote sonnets, and then Sicilian poets who wrote sonnets before him in Italy. And to mention briefly about the greatness of Petrarch, he actually is the inspiration behind the humanist philosophy that came out in Italy. And this actually led to the intellectual flowering of the Renaissance. So, in a way, his philosophy led the way to the Renaissance. That is why Petrarch is considered to be a great personality in the Italian literature. So, what is his greatness? This slide speaks of the greatness of Petrarch. So, you can read here. If any one of you can read the slide, I hope all of you are following me.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, one of you can read the slide. What is the greatness of Petrarch?
Petrarch was a devoted classic scholar and is considered as the father of humanism.
Mm,
It is a philosophy that helped spark and Renaissance. He
mm,
wrote the Canzoniere
mm,
or Rerum Vulgarum
mm,
Fragmenta,
mm,
contains 366 poems, mostly sonnets with a few canzoni
mm,
and compositions in another meters, and
mm,
is divided into two sections. The first is devoted to Laura in life, 1 to 263, and
mm,
the second to Laura in death, 264 to 366. His writing was also used to shape the modern Italian language.
Yes. So here we have seen before these sonnets Edmund Spenser, and we actually discussed how great Spenser was, because he contributed very much to English language, and of course, in the same line, Petrarch is very great. Because he contributed or he shaped the modern Italian language, and also he is known as the father of humanism. And of course, why the sonnet is named as a Petrarchan sonnet, because the number speaks here. Canzoneri is a kind of writing poetry, a meter, like a meter, it is canzoni, and it's believed that Spenser also followed this canzoni style when he wrote his own poems. Okay, so he wrote 366 poems, which are mostly sonnets, and that is why we call it as Petrarchan sonnet, which is having like a sestet and octave, etc. So these sonnets and his philosophy combined together has made Petrarch a great personality, okay, in the Italian literature. And besides that, he is the man behind the revival, because this is the Renaissance, Italian Renaissance, revival of literature, and also revival of Italian language, and of course it is the revival of philosophy in the name of humanism. Okay, because that is why he is considered as the father of humanism. So these three slides are only for your information, to let you know what are what is the greatness of Petrarch, and why we call Italian sonnet as Petrarchan sonnet, because we call English sonnet as the Shakespearean sonnet also, as we are going to see how Shakespeare is great in writing the sonnet sequence that is having 154 sonnets. And also Shakespeare took one form of sonnets with three quatrains and one couplet, and he has perfected the form of English sonnet. Okay, that's how we know that. So just I think some are waiting to be admitted, so let me admit them. And now, yeah, is my slide visible to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so let us continue. So that is the greatness of Petrarch. Just to give you information about the greatness of Petrarch and how he influenced the different English poets, I have given you those introductory slides. Now coming to the influence of Petrarch on English poets, I have given you a list of poets on the slide. See, Henry Howard, who is also known as the Earl of Surrey, and Henry VIII, who is the King of England, and Thomas White, Sir Philip Sidney, Thomas Watson, Michael Drayton, and Edmund Spenser. Of course, William Shakespeare also. Okay, so before Shakespeare, these are the poets who were influenced by the greatness of Petrarch as a sonneteer, and they have they admired the form of sonnet very much, and they have borrowed the form from Italy and their own poetic genre. So Petrarch's greatness is evident in the number that we are looking now, the number of poets whom he influenced, besides Shakespeare. Shakespeare, I did not keep it here because we'll be reading Shakespeare. And then out of all these poets who were influenced by Petrarch, Henry Howard is the one who actually laid the seeds of English sonnet, which we call as a Shakespearean sonnet. Howard had reoriented the sonnet form of Petrarch. The sonnet form of Petrarch is have octave and sestet. That is 14 means 8 plus 6. 2 stanzas. Sonnet of Petrarch is having 2 stanzas with an octave and sestet. Octave having 8 lines and sestet having 6 lines. On the whole, 14 lines. That is the form of Petrarch. And this was borrowed as such. But Henry Howard, the Earl of Essex, he reoriented this form, that is sonnet having 2 stanzas, and then he gave a more symmetrical shape with a repetitive rhyme scheme which accommodates fewer rhymes in the English language, like this, like A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. See, all these Shakespearean sonnets which we are going to read, and most of the sonnets which were there in his sonnet sequence, that means in 154 sonnets. But for a few sonnets, like, the numbers I'll be giving, rest, all the sonnets are having this rhyme scheme, that is A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. Okay, that is 1, second, third, quatrains and couplet. That is how the rhyme scheme runs. And this actually is not the work of Shakespeare, but it is started by Henry Howard himself. And Shakespeare later adopted this form, which was developed by Henry Howard. And in his sequence, dividing the 14 lines of sonnet into 3 quatrains and a couplet. This was introduced by Henry Howard himself, even before Shakespeare, and Shakespeare followed Henry Howard. Okay, so the next, let us see, after adopting the Petrarchan sonnet into English, and because so many sonnetiers or poets were influenced by Petrarch, and because they started writing sonnets during the Renaissance period, and of course even after the Renaissance period, a tradition of writing sonnet sequences has developed in England. Okay, so that is what this slide speaks. So with the arrival of the sonnet in England in the Renaissance period, writing sonnet sequences became popular. So, because sonnet as a poetic genre fascinated many of the poets. And thanks to Petrarch for the way he wrote the sonnets in a very impressive manner and also very inspiring manner, that the form is borrowed from Italy, and then many English poets have owned this poem, this form, and they did not stop writing a few sonnets, but they started writing sonnet sequences, and it became very popular in the Renaissance, and even sonnet sequences, which was written by Sir Philip Sidney. Sir Philip Sidney is a very important figure in the Renaissance English literature, and he is also called as the representative poet of the Renaissance period by many literary critics. And he published in 1591 this Astrophel and Stella, which is a sonnet sequence, and this has given inspiration for many English poets who followed him later. Okay, Sidney, what he did, he actually had recreated the Petrarchan world of proud beauty and despairing lover in a single brilliant stroke. Actually, Astrophel and Stella are the two names. Okay, two, and Sidney did not alter the form of Petrarchan sonnet. He was actually following the Petrarchan form only, and whatever Petrarch did in Italy with his sonnet sequence, that is what Sidney did in English poetry. Okay, and with all the English hands, that means all the English poets who were attempting to write sonnets, and they did not stick on to the Petrarchan model, but they preferred the division of sonnet, as I have already told you, into three quatrains and a couplet. This is very much unlike the Petrarchan form of dividing a sonnet into octave and sestet. So it gave, actually, what is the significance of this development in the history of English literature? This is what the slide, it is as I am giving you in the slide. It gave the English sonnet a significant turn, investing it with an abundant seriousness, and epigrammatic sting. Moreover, within the common ground shared by the sequences, there was much diversity. So, a sonnet sequence, which is a common word to indicate a number of sonnets written by a single sonneteer, of course, are having diverse, themes and diverse ways of writing and diverse styles of writing, though the form is similar. That is the sonnet as a poetic genre might be very similar, and the writing of sonnet sequences is a similar activity, but within the common ground there was much diversity in the sonnet sequences that were produced in England during the Renaissance period under the influence of Petrarch and also other early sonnetiers in English like Sidney. Okay, so here I give the list of sonnet sequences and also the sonnetiers who wrote and when they were published. You might be, if you go to the history of English literature books, you might be, you may come across some other names also. I don't know, but as far as the knowledge goes, I have listed only a few sonnet sequences here, and that you can, of course, keep reading. So here, what is it? So Sidney's Astrophel and Stella. Some of you can read. All of you are here?
Sonnet sequences and sonneteer.
Ah. Who is
Sydney
reading?
G. Monica Madam.
Okay, good.
Sydney's
Mm.
Astrophonia
Mm.
and Stella in 1591.
Oh.
Samuel Daniels
Mm.
Delia 1592.
Delia. Mm.
Michael
Michael.
Michael
Mm.
Drayton's Idea Mirror
Mm. Ideas.
1594.
Mm.
Ideas Mirror 1594. Much
Mm.
revised by 1619.
No.
Edmund Spencer Amoretti
Mm.
1595. William
Mm.
Shakespeare Sonnets 1609.
Yes. So we have located Shakespeare here among all the sonnet sequences that were written during the. Mm, no, who is still joining? Who is this? Don't keep on joining at a late time. Then I have to shift from my presentation to admitting you to the class. Okay. So these are the list of sonnet sequences and sonneteers. And I've given you for your knowledge, for the sake of net and set exam, a brief introduction to all the sonnet sequences on the slides. Some of you can keep reading one after the other. This is about Astrophel and Stella, that is the sonnet sequence by Sir Philip Sidney. One of you can read?
Again, G. Monica Madam.
Yeah. G. Monica, why? Some others can read?
Yes, ma'am. May I?
Raghav.
May I, ma'am?
Yeah, sure.
Monica waits.
Yes.
Astrophel and Stella. It
Mm.
is an Elizabethan sonnet, sequence of 108 sonnets,
Mm.
interrupted with 11 songs by Sir Philip Sidney.
Inter-
It
inters- Interspersed with 11 songs. That means
interspersed
the
with
songs between, among the sonnets, songs keep coming. Okay, 11 songs are there. Mm.
written in
Come, read.
1582 and published
Mm.
posthumously in
Mm.
1591. The work is often considered
Okay.
the finest Elizabethan sonnet cycle after William Shakespeare's
Mm.
sonnets.
So now I hope. What is the meaning of posthumously?
After his death,
Anyone
ma'am.
can tell.
After the
Yeah.
death of the person.
Yes, after the death of no, when Sydney was alive, it was not published. Okay, so after his death only, this sonnet sequence was published. And what is the greatness? It is
Ma'am,
considered
once tell about interspersed, ma'am.
interspersed is in between. 108 sonnets are there. Okay, 11 songs are there among these 108. So these songs, interspersed means coming in between. Maybe 10, after 10 sonnets, one song. Another 10 sonnets, one song, like that. Got the meaning?
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. So after Sydney was, dead, these sonnets were published, and they are also great because they are considered to be great only after William Shakespeare's sonnets, because you might have realized the greatness of William Shakespeare, the giant figure of Elizabethan literature or Renaissance literature, because you are reading the plays of Shakespeare. Okay. So, not only as a playwright, Shakespeare is also great as a sonneteer. So, Sydney's greatness, of course, can be estimated with this line that he is considered the greatest only after Shakespeare. And next slide, some someone else. Come on, don't waste
May I,
time.
ma'am?
Yeah, sure. Just tell your name and read.
Yashoda Krishna, ma'am.
Yeah, read.
It tells the story of Stella, star beloved by Astrophel, star lover or
Mm.
beloved of a star. A
Mm.
play on Sydney's name,
Mm.
who loves poetry almost as much as he loves her. He
Yes.
details his passionate feeling.
Passionate.
Okay,
Passionate.
madam. Yes, ma'am.
Ah.
Passionate
Mm.
feelings for Stella, his struggles with conflicting emotions, and his final decision to abandon his pursuit of her in favor of a life of public service. In observations of
Observe.
Okay, ma'am. Observance of contemporary poetic conventions, Sydney discourses on reason, oblique passion, wit and will in his sonnets. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, this is all. Yeah, thank you, Ashada. This is all about Stella, Astrophel and Stella. This is the story of Stella. This is star. Actually, this is a lady who is compared to a star and beloved by Astrophel, that is star lover. People say, the critics say that Astrophel is none other than Sydney. Just a minute, I'm admitting someone else who joined now. Yeah. So this is a play on Sydney's name, star lover or beloved of a star, etc. He played on his name for himself, and who loves poetry almost as much as he loves her. He loves poetry as well as he loves Stella also. And in the sonnet sequence, what he did is he details his passionate feelings towards this lady, Stella, and also he struggles with the conflicting emotions. Actually, this love will not end with consummation. Rather, he abandons this love, pursuit of love, in favor of the public service career. Sydney, I think, was a part of army. Okay, so he leaves his beloved, luring his beloved and writing poems, etc., and goes and joins in the army. And that's how I think he had early death also. If you read the biography of Sydney, you will come to that. In absence of contemporary poetic conventions, this is during the Renaissance period, we have some conventions in poetry. That is to present the reason and passion, wit and will. So this is very much shown in Sydney's sonnets. Reasoning is presented, and also passion is presented in the form of love, and you will come across reason also. Wit is such a kind of subtle humor, and will also is presented in these songs that are written by Sydney. Okay, next we have Daniel's Dahlia. A little information about Daniel's Dahlia sonnet sequence. Some other next student can. Yeah, who is this?
Vasanta ma'am.
Yeah, sure, read.
Daniel's Dahlia. Daniel's poetry is characterized by a moral earnestness, the correctness of his English, and self-control rather than vital movement or passion. Dahlia, a sequence of 37 sonnets, 1591, 1592, 1594, that deals with the passionate and artless love of a poet speaker who is seemingly more interested in gaining his beloved's love than in poetic renown. Dahlia is often depicted as a frowning lady with eyes as bright as stars, as cruel as she is fair.
Yes, Daniel's poetry, of course, is characterized by a moral earnestness and also the correctness of his English and self-control rather than vital movement or passion. This is a sequence of 37 sonnets, and again, this name of the sonnet sequence is the name of a lady who is known or who is depicted as a frowning lady. Frowning means a very serious lady with bright eyes, which are compared to stars, and also she is considered to be cruel, in her lover, though she is fair, means beautiful. Okay, and it seems the poet is very passionate, in though he wrote poems, he's not serious about writing poetry, but he's very serious about gaining the love of his beloved. So that is what is Daniel's Delia says. And also, the second slide also speaks of Daniel's Delia, where the poet speaker, actually is protesting his sincerity and frequently referring to painting, limiting that is painting as being a means to counterfeit emotion. So, of course, he is not successful in getting or securing Delia's love, but the sonnet sequence ends with a seemingly coy, I say no more, I fear I said too much. However, given that Daniel revised Delia 6 times over a period of 10 years, so of course we can think why he has been revising the sequence, because he himself is confused in his self representation. Okay, one of you can read this slide also.
Yes,
Madam
ma'am.
Raghamonika, I'll read, ma'am.
Yeah, sure.
The poet speaker, on the other hand, protests his sincerity and frequently refers to limning, painting as being as means to counterfeit emotion, unlike his own expressions of woe for not being able to secure Delia's love. Interestingly, the final sonnet of the sequence ends with a seemingly coy, I say no more. A fear ends with I said too much. However, given that Daniel revised Delia 6 times over a period of 10 years, it is not surprising that there is some confusion in the poet speaker's self representation.
Yes. So you will be understanding how the custom or a tradition of writing sonnet sequences, and where one lady is there, and for whose love the poet or the poet speaker also, we can say, will be always trying to lure, cajole, and secure the love of this lady. And we have different stories where we have seen Astrophel and Stella, where Sydney, of course, had used a pun of the name Astrophel and Stella, and also he was not successful in gaining the love of his lady, that is Laura, I think. No, Laura is Petrarch's, Stella. And here Delia also did the same thing. And Delia, you know, Daniel was not a serious poet, and he was serious in gaining his love. And of course, the sonnet sequence ends only with a seemingly coy. I say no more. I fear I said too much. Where we don't get any, what do you say, hint of how it ended. Anyways, but it was a very popular, sonnet sequence also, because he edited it many times and then he published it again and again. And then we have another, that is Michael Drayton's Ideas Mirror. Someone else can read this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Michael Drayton,
Who is
1560.
reading? Who is reading?
Yashoda Krishna,
Yeah,
ma'am.
give chance to others.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah.
Michael Drayton's
Come on. Who is reading?
Satyavini, ma'am.
Satyavani? Okay, right.
Yes, ma'am. Michael Drayton, 1563 to 1631, began composing his sonnet sequence, Ideas Mirrored,
Mm.
1994, and revised it frequently before publishing the
Final version.
only
Your internet connection is not good. Yeah, Satyavani, did you finish reading? I
No,
think her
ma'am.
net connection. Yeah, it's going on.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, read completely. Your net is not good, I think. Your voice is broken.
Okay. Not the only work in which Drayton invokes idea.
Mm.
In that title The Mirror alludes to an important figure in his life,
Hmm.
Annie Goodyear, the daughter of his early patron, Sir Henry Goodyear.
Yes. So Michael Drayton's sonnet sequence is named as Ideas Mirror. It is published in 1594, and he also revised it frequently before publishing it in a final version in 1619 under the title Idea, not Ideas Mirror, Idea. And of course, in this work, Drayton invokes idea in the title and also the mirror. It alludes to an important figure in his life who is named as Annie Goodyear, the daughter of his patron, Sir Henry Goodyear. Okay. One more slide is also there regarding the Drayton, because she and Annie Goodyear and Drayton were childhood friends, and but he could not marry her, and she was married to someone else, but they remained friendly. That you can read later. Now comes the Spencer's Emerity. One more, of course, it is polemical because some agree that Spencer is good as a sonneteer, not good also. Some say that he's not good because his sonnets were overshadowed by the greatness of his other poems, especially the Fairy Queen, the Shepherd's Calendar, or the two poems that we have read, Epithalamion and Prothalamion, etc. Whatever it is, some agree that, of course, Spencer did a great thing by writing this sonnet sequence, that is Amority. So someone else can read this.
Ma'am, Prasanna ma'am.
Ma'am, I want to read, ma'am.
Yeah, Prasanna came first. No, just let her go on. Next, you can read.
Spencer's Amarity,
Hmm.
1595. Amarity is a sonnet sequence of 89 poems dedicated to Elizabeth Boyle, the lady of his dreams, who he pursues and eventually married in 1594. Amarity has been largely overlooked and unappreciated by critics, who see it as inferior to other major Renaissance sonnet sequences in the Petrarchan tradition.
Petrarchan tradition. So, who is Elizabeth Boyle?
Spencer's
And
wife.
Spencer's wife, ma'am.
Ah, wife. Yeah, the about the marriage day in Epithalamion we have seen, no? So the same Elizabeth Boyle. People believe that Spencer actually wrote this sonnet while he was in love with Elizabeth Boyle, and also she was the lady of his dreams, and of course he married, and on the day of marriage only he wrote Epithalamion. But as I told you, that the critics who are very much fascinated by other works of Spencer, of course, think that the sonnets is not a great work by Spencer. Yet some critics believe that sonnets of Spencer are also great. In the next slide, I have given that information only, that you can read later. So next, we come to the prescribed part, that is Shakespeare's sonnet. Okay, sonnets. It is also a sonnet sequence. Okay. Next, who was there in the line last time?
Raji, ma'am.
Raji,
Raji, ma'am.
Raj, yeah, you can read.
As the history of English literature in England reveals, Shakespeare, though is the greatest of sonnetiers, however, is not the first one to write sonnets or sequence. Sonnet arrived in England in the early 18th century, 50 years before the birth of Shakespeare. Shakespeare followed the Henry Howard's model of sonnet and refined it in his
sequence. Yes. So as we have discussed so many sonnet sequences till now, That itself shows that Shakespeare is not the first one to write the sonnet sequence or even the sonnets, because sonnets arrived 50 years before the birth of Shakespeare in England. Okay. Yet it is very interesting to note that English sonnet is renamed as a Shakespearean sonnet. So there lies the greatness of Shakespeare, which without stating, we can understand the greatness of Shakespeare as a sonneteer or the greatness of his sonnets. Though sonnet is very popular. By the time Shakespeare arrived on the scene of writing these sonnets, say sonnet as a poetic genre is very popular. And not only sonnet as a genre, but writing sonnet sequences was also very popular. As we have seen so many sonnet sequences and the sonnetiers, and also the great Edmund Spenser, who wrote the sequence, and of course Sir Philip Sidney, who is the representative figure of Renaissance. And Spenser, as I have already told you, is very well known as the poet's poet. Okay, in spite of all those great figures who have written sonnets before Shakespeare, of course, though he arrived late, he was the latest in the sense he became one of the greatest of sonnetiers in English. And the poetic genre of sonnet, which is English sonnet, is renamed as Shakespearean sonnet. It's also called as Elizabethan sonnet or Shakespearean sonnet, more famously because critics believed that he's the one who perfected the form of sonnet in the form of 3 quatrains and 1 couplet. Okay, and of course Shakespeare has taken the model of Henry Howard's model, which we have already discussed. Henry Howard, Thomas White, Sidney, etc. All the list of poets that I have given, they are all influenced by the great Petrarch. Okay. Who had written sonnets in Italy, and they have borrowed it. And Henry Howard did not follow or stick to Petrarchan style, but he changed the style of English sonnet, like 3 quatrains and couplet, and Shakespeare followed this model. And of course, he refined it very much in his sequence. So, what is the greatness or uniqueness of these Shakespeare's sonnets? This will be one of the questions for you. You may get, without referring to any of the prescribed sonnets, you may be asked to write what is the uniqueness of Shakespeare's sonnet sequence or Shakespeare's sonnet, or what is the greatness, etc. For that, these points will help you. Even before the slide before this will also help you as an answer. Okay, this someone else can read.
Ma'am, we also
Uniqueness.
read, ma'am. Ma'am, Tulsi, ma'am.
Yeah, great.
The most striking quality of Shakespeare's sonnets is uncanny detachment of the voice that speaks them. This voice performs its utterance as a poet and an actor, but not as a dramatic inwardness or character in a play. Shakespeare, unlike his protagonist dislikes self-overhearing, like the fair young man, the dark lady, and the rival poet. Sorry, his other
conscious fiction. Is another conscious fiction. Okay, so what is the uniqueness of Shakespeare's sonnets? The most striking quality, very important quality or significant quality of Shakespeare's sonnets is the uncanny detachment of the voice that speaks them. If you go to the text of the sonnets. For example, the sonnet 18 is prescribed for you. If you go to that sonnet, the first line is like this: shall I compare thee to a summer's day? That is how it starts. And when you read that sonnet, you feel that I is there, okay, the first person. Yet that speaker's voice is very much detached, okay, from the poet or the author. Sonnet, uncanny detachment of the voice that speaks them. The voice speaks, but we cannot take the voice as one of the characters in the sonnets. Okay, you might be aware, because if you are literature students in graduation itself, by this time you might have realized that the sonnets are having three important persons. One is the fair young man, the dark lady, and the rival poet. Okay, and one more I is there who speaks. They are not these two characters. So there is another conscious fiction. Okay, consciously one person is there, but that person is always detaching from the voice that is performing, okay, or uttering the sentences, who is, the voice performs its utterances as a poet and as an actor, but not as a dramatic inwardness or character in a play. So that voice is not one among the characters that appear in the sonnet sequence. This is the uniqueness of Shakespeare's sonnet. And Shakespeare, unlike his protagonist, declines self-overhearing. Like the self-overhearing is like you find it in Hamlet. Is the play Hamlet finished for you?
Yes, ma'am, completed.
Yeah, then the self-overhearing is there in the, you have soliloquies in Hamlet. So unlike his protagonist, protagonist means what? Actors.
Central character.
Yeah, characters. Not only central, all characters are protagonists only. So declines self-overhearing. They actually overhear, but in sonnets, we don't have that. Okay, we have three characters, that is the fair young man, the dark lady, and the rival poet. And he is another conscious fiction. So one I, it goes on in the sonnet sequence, but that I is not connected to anyone else. Okay. Next, the uniqueness continues. One of you can read. Who is there to read?
The speaker of the sonnet.
Yeah. Read.
Yes, ma'am. The speaker of the sonnets is merely a voice. Yes. Okay, ma'am. The speaker of the sonnets is merely a voice. As such, the voice is endlessly flexible and has no rival among lyric voices in the language. But Shakespeare maintenance is curious impersonality, as though all the humiliations, disappointments, bitterly are being
betrayals
are being suffered by someone else. He introduced a new kind of subjectivity. One.
I, that is I, not one. Okay. So the speaker of the sonnets is merely a voice. So one I or one voice continues throughout the sonnets, but he is not one of the characters. And as such, the voice is endlessly flexible and has no rival among lyric voices in the language. So here, critics say that No other sonnet sequence will maintain this kind of, okay, what you say, flexible voice, the speaker's voice, which is not having any rival among lyric voices in the language. The lyric voices means the voice in the poetry, or here for us the sonnets. So no other sonnet sequence will have a speaker who maintains such a kind of detachment from whatever is happening in the sonnet sequence, and also the characters. Okay. Then Shakespeare maintains his curious impersonality. So there you find a kind of impersonality that is maintained throughout the sonnet sequence, though the I is always present. He introduced a new kind of subjectivity, that is I, but that I always remains impersonal. And as though all the humiliations, disappointment, betrayals are being suffered by someone else. So you can see in the sonnet sequence different themes that are being dealt, where you have some kind of humiliations also, disappointments also, betrayals of love, etc. They are presented with such a great impersonality that you will find that this is not the speaker, but someone else is undergoing all these feelings. This is the greatness of Shakespeare, where he was successful in introducing a new kind of subjectivity, the I. Okay. Then next, of course, is there anyone to read?
Bless you, ma'am.
Yeah. Continue.
Sonnets present an astonishing range of voice, images, situations, crisis, meditation, and resignation. They exhibit an introspective tone and fearless examining of oneself, which makes these sonnets a separate group from other sonnet sequences.
Yeah, he actually, if you go through the sonnets, only 5 are prescribed for you, but if you are interested, you can read some more. The whole sequence is available in our library. So, from the exemplary sonnets that are prescribed for our study itself, we can notice that they present an astonishing range of voice. Okay, different, as if some voices, different voices are speaking. We have significant images and fabulous situations, and moments of crisis, and also meditation. When I think sonnet number 30, when I in silent thought, some line goes on, in that we have meditation. Okay. And then resignation, resigning
Went
from
to the
all.
session of sweet silence
Yeah,
thought.
yes, that sonnet, he meditates. And then in some other sonnets, we feel this feeling of resignation. And some sonnets, of course, present a kind of situation, and a moments of crisis, and different images, wonderful images that we will come across in the sonnets of Shakespeare. And then they also exhibit an introspective tone. What is introspection? Introspection is? What is introspection? Introspection is,
Self-examining.
okay, self-examining. And you will find actually the sonnet number 30 presents meditation along with introspection also, and also fearless examining of oneself. So you will find one examining oneself without any fear, and which makes these sonnets a separate group from other sonnet sequences. All these qualities, the astonishing range of voice, images, situation, introspections, and fearless examining of oneself, and the tone which is introspective at many times, of course, makes this sequence a separate group of sequence, which can be differentiated from the sonnet sequences that we have already discussed, which were written before Shakespeare. Okay, next. Why they are popular? No boys are there in the class? They are not reading at all. Yeah, anyways, so now I am coming to, I think, to the end, not much, but I have some more slides which you need to write down because they present some important points. So what the popularity till now we are discussing the uniqueness, and of course the popularity is for the lyrical originality. Actually, your sonnet 116 is prescribed for your study. 116 is prescribed, no?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Yes,
that
ma'am.
like let me not to the
Let me
marriage
not
of
the marriage of true
the
minds admit impediments. Love is not love.
yeah, that is actually a sonnet which is very popular for its lyrical quality, which is used as a greeting card or for love or marriage also. So the greatness of Shakespeare sonnets is their lyrical originality and also originality of voice, and which is recognizable, and also we find a kind of thought and feeling. Of course, if you read 116 out of the context also, you will find all these qualities in the Shakespearean sonnet, and they are so divergent also, very different from one another, though they are in a sequence. And of course they actually fit in to the sequence when we read it as sequence, but if we remove them from the sequence and read it, they of course appear very different from one another, yet they are very ambitious, memorable, and stand preeminently above his peers, his contemporaries. Many have written sonnet sequences, but above all, we can find that these sonnets or Shakespeare's sonnets are very great. Okay, and they are written following the model of three quatrains, which I have been telling you, and a couplet from a form of sonnet. And there are a few exceptions for this. This is sonnet 99. You will have 15 lines. 126, 12 lines in couplets. It is written completely in couplets. Means 6 couplets will be there in 126. And 145 is having only 14 lines with 8 syllables. Actually, they are written with the iambic pentameter lines. Okay, that means 5 syllables in a pentameter, 5 syllables stressed and unstressed, like that. There is a pattern that is followed, but in 145 sonnet, it is 14 lines, but with a different number of syllables that is written. Then come to the structure of sonnet sequence. Here, some critics say that there is a structure within the sequence. Actually, this structure is like the Petrarchan sonnet structure, where you have octave and sustate. Okay. Some critics say that sonnets, parallels the structure of an individual sonnet. So just as each sonnet has an octave, volta, and sustate, the overall sequence of sonnets is divided into 2 main sections with the thematic turn in between. Like the first 126 sonnets actually are about the fair youth, and scholars believe that it serves as the octave. And then because they build an argument about poetry's power. Take, for example, sonnet number 18. Okay, that is, shall I compare thee to some is a summer's day, etc., where the couplet concludes that this you will be immortal in my rhyme. Okay, and if someone denies this, he says that think that nobody. He says that he is posing a challenge actually. So there you will find that the sonnet sequence, the whole sequence is presenting a structure within them, which is equal to the structure of a sonnet. So this you can of course write down, and the first part of the sonnets, that is first 126, they present like the octave, and then sonnet 126, an irregular 12-line sonnet made up of couplets, just now I told you, is considered as the alta. Okay. And it announces the thematic and tonal turn in the sequence. Alta is the last two lines of the octave, where you will find a kind of change in the tone of the sonnet, or turn from the theme, etc. So this is present in sonnet 126. And the final 28 sonnets focus on the speaker's relationship with the dark lady, and these final poems can be seen as sestate that challenges and contrasts the first set of sonnets. This is a different sequence. And here, there you have all positive images and conventions that are followed, but in the last part, you have negative comparisons, conventions are broken, etc. So the last two poems in the sequence offer a very concise, unspecific points about love in general by using Cupid as a conceit. And these two poems therefore signify the couplet or final takeaway from the sequence. So critics consider that the last two sonnets are like the couplets in a sonnet form. So this is how some critics feel that there is a structure within structure. And when you come to the composition of sonnets, when they were composed, etc., and when they were published, this slide speaks of that. You can just read, all of you can read or note down regarding the composition. Finally, it was published in a small quarto, like Thomas Thorpe, he is the publisher. Like a small book, the Sonnets, in 1609. Of course, so many scholars did not agree with this, yet many of the scholars have come to agreement to take this year as the final year of publication of Shakespeare's sonnets. You can write down this also. And we have the division, like mainly they are divided into two groups, like till 126 or 5, that is what you say, the fair youth or fair young man, and then the rest the dark lady. But within that we have different themes. See, 1 to 17, 18 to 25, like this. Within these groups of sonnets you will find different theme, the procreation theme, power of poetry, that is what sonnet number 18. And then the theme of despair and time, that is you have sonnet number 30, that is prescribed for your study. And then the theme of fickle youth, and of course love also in 116. And then about the dark lady, 130 sonnet is prescribed for you. So all representative sonnets of sonnets from one theme is only left, I think, procreation, where the speaker of the sonnets will always be pleading the fair young man to get married, because he doesn't want his beauty to disappear from the earth, because our beauty or whatever properties that we have will be carried out or carried in through our progeny only, procreation. So each representative sonnet is prescribed for your study. So this is about the division. And then to explain the themes, how I know the sonneteer will be presenting these poems in each of the themes within the number of sonnets. I have given the slides. Do you want to write down? Say yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, from which slide you want to write down? From the
Take
uniqueness.
screenshot,
We'll
ma'am.
take screenshots, ma'am.
Yeah, from which sonnet? From which
We will take
first
screenshots, ma'am.
onwards, why do you need?
From
I have
first
given
onwards,
you
ma'am.
additional information only. You want that? Otherwise, I will share the PPT.
We'll take screenshots, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Screen. Shall I say share the PPT?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. I will share it anyway. Okay, right.
Share PPT,
Yeah,
ma'am.
I will share it. So let me stop here. This is the introduction for sonnets. It's a very brief introduction. It might be having so much about the dark lady, fair young man, who is the speaker. We have so many books also, so many critics who actually dealt in different ways in explaining or in interpreting sonnets. Actually, we are not going into that. We have one important book that is Harold Bloom's. Shakespeare's sonnets is there. If you can Google for that, it will be available. But so much information is given in those essays that are presented on the sonnets regarding the speakers and the themes, etc. But fundamentally, this much is enough. And when we come to the individual sonnets, I'll be explaining each sonnet in a detailed manner. Okay, I think we can close here.
Okay,
Okay,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Battery కూడా అయిపోయింది, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
Have a good day. No, good night, or it's only good evening. Okay, bye. See you all.
Bye,
Thank
ma'am.
you,
Thank you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.